like to think that there should be no difference between being a boy or a girl practicing architecture. I know this issue of gender keeps coming up, but I don't think it's a relevant debate. My parents met at architecture school. My mother was a very pretty, very beautiful woman, and was, I think, one of the only girls at the time. I think there were two in the department. One quit. My mother continued. My father was a bad boy, and not a very pretty boy. But then I don't know how he got her, and then ended up together. And then my mother became the first registered architect in Lebanon. She did have sort of a timid beginning, professional beginnings, but she did mainly institutional work, and never really started on her own. It's probably my father's fault. He was not an easy man. So she gave it up, and then at some point she gave it up quite early, and took care of her family, and raised 3 boys and a girl. I was the last one. Came very late. I don't think they wanted me. I was an accident. Have I thought about whether my mother had continued her career? I don't think I'd be here. Simple as that. So for me, maybe it's a good thing that my mother quit. I don't think she would have had me at 40 years old if she was still practicing, and going at it like my father was going at it, because my father was very much of a warrior. My mother was not. She had other wars to lead. I do recognize the fact that my father is still very central and it was very important, and not only in my life as a father, but also as some sort of role model. And I don't think he was a perfect man. Very far from that. But whether I like it or not, he's still around. But I remember this incident. My youngest uncle, who was my father's brother, youngest brother, who didn't have kids, was close to me and had organized a dinner after I had come back with my fabulous degrees. My uncle was very proud of me. Organized a dinner family dinner, where he wanted me to show some of the works I had produced. So this was the first lecture I ever gave. It was a lecture I gave to my family in my uncle's apartment. So there was a carousel, and I did my little presentation. Usually my father is never part of these family gatherings. He was never there. But that night, I don't know why, he ended up there at that dinner. So I was very confused, and I start my projection, and my presentation went for about half an hour, and then by the time I was done, I had turned on the lights, and the first person I looked at was my father. This was the first time I was showing, and it was very important to see what kind of reaction he was going to have. And what do I see? The man was sleeping, literally. So that's a serious punch in the face you get at 23 years old. But my father never looked and never asked, and never looked at what I had been doing for 7 years of architecture school. Zero. And I'm sure he was very curious, but he never approached me, never looked, had absolutely no idea. We never had a conversation about that. It can seem very strange. And I think he started taking me seriously when I completed my first building. I have a boy, Taimur, who is 14 years old now, and I have a little girl, Lila, who is 10 years old. I don't think I would encourage my son to go into architecture, but he'll do whatever he wants. I don't think he's very much interested in that, and that's good for him. Just like I think my father was not very happy initially when I decided to do that. I think both my brothers at some point wanted to do that. I think he was young enough at the time to deviate them, and that was good for them. And I came last, and it was the war, and I just slipped away and did it far away from him in the US, although he was very influential in the choice of the career, and later on until today, I think his work keeps coming back, directly or indirectly in my work. Maybe Lila I would tolerate a bit more, because I think then the gender issue comes back, comes back at me. But maybe my little girl, because she's my little girl, and because I'll have another sort of, it's a different situation. Don't take my relationship with my daughter as something general that, you know, is a sort of male-female thing. I might change my mind, and she might never be an architect. She probably won't be an architect, but just because I think she's by definition very different from me. She's not just because she's a female, but she's very different. I wouldn't like to clone myself. I think that'd be a very bad idea. So obviously it would have been more obvious to clone myself with Taimur, my son, than to clone myself with my little girl, who's a very pretty creature to start with, and unlike me, so. And then after I had completed my graduate studies, I jumped back to Beirut, not knowing whether I was going to stay in Beirut. And then I moved because obviously I wanted to start on my own, but I couldn't. So my father and the family gave me a space, a tiny little office in that huge furniture factory that the family owned in the back of the design studio, where I spent the first 9 years of my practice working, from 1993 till 2002. I left a month after my father left Beirut for good to start a new life in the US. And a month after my father was gone, the banks seized the factory, which was going bankrupt, and I was kicked out of that space. But I spent 9 years there. The family offered me my first PC, supported me financially for at least 4 or 5 years, until I could, until my practice began to generate some income. So I do owe them a lot. When is this going to stop?